was the PSYOPs, you know, psychological operations, and targeting people, and the harassment and the persecution. And I can't tell you how many people made fun of me for doing that. And then, of course, I had the government people who were the shills, you know, the so-called alternative media or whistleblower shills, government shills, who were coming after me and telling me, oh, don't talk about the harassment. You won't have any credibility. Don't talk about the harassment. And I told them, mind your own business. I will talk about the harassment. I will tell the truth about what has happened to me, and I will continue to investigate, and every time I get a name, I will expose the name. And that's what needs to be done, Keith. That's what you're doing on your program, by getting people on who are truthful and that are going to expose the types of operations that are actually going on.
Now, what seems to me to be the case, and that is, usually when anybody hears a show like that, they wind up, there's still more questions than answers that they have. They're willing to listen, and they've allowed themselves to broach this topic, but they still are quite suspect, and I don't blame them. But what I think happens also is that, and let's face it, why wouldn't the military try this stuff out on the population in what they would call a controlled situation?
Well, they've been doing it for decades, Keith. You know that.
Well, we know in large-scale operations they've tested on populations and not told them. And Punta Gorda down here in 1949 got sprayed, and they didn't know it.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
But in these pockets, why wouldn't they try out certain weaponry? I mean, now we're starting to realize it's actually broken into the mainstream that military, if they have to be employed for crowd control, are probably not going to resort to live ammo or rubber bullets. They're just going to go ahead and hit you with a pulse.
Well, exactly, Keith. And here's the thing. You see, I have to state this because it's very important that I'm not a scientist, and I am not an expert on the technical stuff, the weaponry or anything like that. There are certain people who do have expertise, and I think Eleanor White is one of them because she is a scientist. But my area of expertise is the PSYOPs, you know, the psychological operations. And the one thing that I can say, it's very important, is that I know about these weapons, not because I'm a scientist or have expertise on the actual technology, but because they have been used on me for decades. And when I first went out public and started talking about this, I drew a lot of derision from people because they were saying to me, well, things like that don't happen. They don't knock people out with microwave pulse beam weapons. They don't kill people. They call them non-lethal, but they're not. They're lethal. They certainly have the potential to be lethal. And meanwhile, as we spoke about on one of the other shows, Keith, this technology has been around for decades, and as you said, it's only now coming into the public vision that it exists, with all the taser madness and all that. This is something that's they're doing, and certainly, if you consider the fact that they want to test these weapons, you know, these psychotronic or electromagnetic weapons. Sure, they don't care who gets hurt. They'll go after anybody, just even as a guinea pig. That's how they're used on some people, even though others would have been designated targets, and in that case it's a different story. But that's correct what you said. I mean, they routinely do these without informed consent, and that is the important phrase, informed consent.
Yeah. Again, we're talking with Barbara Hartwell. The website is barbarahartwell.blogspot.com. That link will obviously accompany the audio that you're listening to right now, so you know how to get there with a click. There's another thing also afoot, and and here's the problem also. We may never know, we may suspect, and perhaps accurately so, but it's not worth getting freaked out if you can't get to the root of the situation, and I'll be specific about what that situation is. so much to the point where you get so worked up that your reaction to what might be happening is more damaging, debilitating health-wise than actually what they're doing to you. And my point is this: people have suspected in certain parts of the country, even some for only a period of time, that they've heard hums, they've felt something that had not been in their environment before, and wondered what's going on. Or people had some symptoms and couldn't figure out what in the world was happening.
Oh, yeah. Well, you know, Keith, again, speaking from a perspective of a non-scientist, I can still relate some of the symptoms that have been reported to me personally, you know, in investigations of targets, and also things that have happened to me. Some of these things have happened to me, but you know, these weapons have the ability to disrupt your whole system. You know, the system of your body, your energy field of your body. I mean, they can create all kinds of symptoms. You know, people have reported, you know, a ringing in the ears. That's one of them. I'm sure you've heard that, right?
Oh yeah.
The ringing in the ears.
Oh yeah.
Headaches. You know, including like migraine type headaches. There's nausea. I can tell you that one of the worst hits I ever took, this was many years ago. I think it was in 1994, which is the very year that I got out of CIA, but it was very bad. In the middle of the night, I was sleeping. You know, I was living in Connecticut at the time. I was living in Milford, Connecticut, right on the Long Island Sound there. And middle of the night, I'm sleeping, when suddenly I was jolted out of a dead sleep by a pain so excruciating and severe in my head that I could barely breathe, Keith. I could barely breathe, and it became so bad that the next thing I know, in addition to the pain in my head, I had projectile vomiting. Now, you know what that is, right?
Oh, yeah, that's hurling a squirrel.
Projectile vomiting. It was so bad. I literally, at that time, I crawled. I had to literally crawl to the bathroom, throwing up, crawling. And I finally was able to get hold of the telephone, and I called a friend. I didn't want to call, like, 911 or anything like that. I called a friend who lived maybe about 20 miles away in Connecticut, and I asked him, I told him it was an emergency, could he come over, and he did. And while I was waiting for him to come, I passed out. And the only reason that I didn't die was because I had an angel visit me, Keith. I had an angel visit me, and I was told that I was getting help, and I survived it, but I was in bed for 3 days after this incident. That's how bad it was. So this was an attempt to kill me. There's no doubt in my mind. And I've had several episodes very similar to that. So this is how serious it can get. People don't understand, you know, when they hear about this, that no, it doesn't usually happen that bad. It's not usually that extreme. But it is sometimes, and people have died. Well,
the Air Force a couple of years ago, and I think it still might be available, although I ripped it when I first came upon it, again, back around 03 or so. And it was this big white paper on non-lethal weaponry.
Yes.
And, of course, the joke of that is, how lethal is non-lethal weaponry when you want to use it for that particular reason?
It's just
sure
a term.
Sure.
That's all it is. It's a label they've smacked on. Non-lethal. Nothing could be further from the truth. It's a matter of degree. Anything, I mean, water can be lethal, right? You could swim and it's non-lethal. If you drown, it's lethal.
Sure.
So, I mean, it's the same kind of idiocy here. To put a label like, oh, it's safe for the police to use tasers